Good evening. I'll be talking about the Rodney King incident. My presentation is based on research on a historical criminal justice event or incident that helped shape some facet of modern day progressive law enforcement. This incident was, in my own opinion, was the defining moment for law enforcement. And it was a turning point for their behavior in a whole when it came to police brutality. We're going to be talking about three key progressive reforms in law enforcement. Out of this research that I conducted, I came to understand that even though there were so many reforms within the police department, and we're going to be talking about the main department, which was LAPD back in 1991. So we're going to have examples for that department when it comes to the incident and the aftermath of the Rodney King incident. So our main points are going to be community policing, use of force, policy, and the hiring practices during that time and after the Rodney King incident. As I mentioned before, it was a defining moment for law enforcement during that time, during this era of that incident. And it was pretty much a turning point for a lot of police departments around the country. So we're going to move on forward and do a basic introduction as to law enforcement. As we know, law enforcement is always evolving and progressing as the world continues to exist and human beings continue to coexist. If I'm not sure if you can see the bottom of the screen there. I'm going to move my iPad a little bit. For this presentation, as I was trying to look for a Bible verse to relate to this presentation, I came across Ecclesiastes 1:9, which says the following: "What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun." For King Solomon, I believe he came to a conclusion at his old age of life, and he understood that whatever has been in the past, or whatever it is now in the present, has been in the past. So, in how I relate this Bible verse to this presentation is that we will always have issues in law enforcement and in society. Society tends to change. Generations tend to evolve. People are different as new generations come up to exist. So I believe that law enforcement is always evolving. It's always in progression. It's always innovating. As times and seasons go by, law enforcement will always be moving forward, depending on the society that the current time they live in. So, saying that now, there are three eras of American policing. three eras. And we read this in class, and I pretty much understood each era, and I was amazed of how each era was different as time progressed and as innovation and technology and policy innovated. I understand that there are three American policing, which is the political era from 1840 to 1930, the reform era from 1930 to 1980, and the one that we're in right now, which is the community era from 1980 to the present. We're going to give a quick explanation of each little era in this presentation. We understand that police departments were decentralized during that era of the political era. During this era, police, they were very corrupt. It was a time where there was pretty much no set rules or regulations or manuals or how to become a police officer or how to act with the community. There was nothing. So they were, it was a time of learning, and so these officers during that time, they ruled with an iron fist, and we understand that police brutality was normal in this era. So if you think today we have an issue with police brutality, I could imagine during that time in the political era. The main purpose was to provide service to community and favors to political bosses. Prohibition caused widespread police corruption, and during this era, police officers were community orientated. Now that we live in this era of community policing, it began back in 1840 to 1930, but with a twist. There was no real, as I mentioned before, there was no real education or structure in the police departments. And during this time, foot patrol and bike patrol was established. And so this is the political era of the 1840s to the 1930s. And so then after that, we move forward to the reform era, 1930s to the pretty much 1980. Police departments became more centralized. Law enforcement the law enforcement ethical codes of conduct were created during this time. Policing became a profession with better pay. Technology advanced with 911 emergency phone systems, and police patrolled on vehicles. Police were distant from the community relations, and corruption was targeted during the reform era. Lots of things going on during this era. Technology pushed law enforcement into a different level, and what I understood from doing this research, that policing became a profession, whereas before it was not a profession. It was pretty much more of a rugged profession during that time. So this was a reform era, 1930 to the 1980s. We're going to move on forward to community era. The community era is from 1980 to the present. Community policing, what we know is when police officers and citizens often come into contact with each other for the reasons of that, other than criminal investigations, such as instances in police helping people in need, organizing youth events, and coordinating community outreach. Community policing was one form or a reform of and progress for law enforcement as a result of the Rodney King incident. Community policing continues to evolve with the community as time progresses. And this is the one we're living in right now. There is a little bit of change as we speak in regards to terrorism, but that's a different subject, and which is not in this presentation. So we move to the Rodney King incident. The Rodney King incident, which occurred in March 3, 1991. The incident involved several LAPD officers and Rodney King. The main problem here was that King attempted to evade police on the vehicle, and King was, unfortunately, he was beaten severely by officers as he resisted arrest. He received several baton hits to his face, head, and body. Also, he was kicked several times, and they used a gun stun twice on him. This was the basic incident that occurred during this time. And unfortunately, thanks to technology, as camcorders were evolving in that era, the incident was caught on video. The video tape was broadcast on cable news network on March 5th and then